Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and start to get jumped into our topic here, which, as I said, is skyrocketing your applicant connect rate and discovering your hiring funnel health. So I've got a few more people joining. I'll just let them do that, but I'm going to jump in. Like I said, I'm Jen, I'm one of the co-founders of Augusta. And if just in case, as a refresher on Zoom, and the webinar here. Feel free to use that Q&A tool. You should see that at the bottom of your screen. And you can chat in questions at any time, and I will get to them as soon as I see them. I may be switching back and forth from talking and answering your questions, but I love questions and engagement. So go ahead and add those in there as you come up with them. And we are recording this. So if somebody is missing this opportunity, it'll be on our website in a couple of days and I'll email it out. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our first agenda item, which is our agenda. So here's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk just briefly about what a hiring funnel is, just to get level set, make sure we're all on the same page. I'm going to talk a little bit about why it matters, what a healthy hiring funnel is, and what are the things you need to measure and how you measure it. I'm going to talk about about disqualified applicants and the volume of applicants in total. And then I'm going to close it out with your applicant connect rate and why that is important. If you stick around for 10 minutes at the end, I am also going to share a little bit about Augusta and what we do. But for the most part today, it's going to be educational content, not related to Augusta too much. But I am using our data that we have to help kind of explain some of the points in your hiring funnel that are important. So with that, I actually do need to start with telling you a little bit about Augusta, so that way you know where we're getting our data from. So Augusta solution is pretty simple. Basically, what we do is we connect with your job boards and identify and motivate the right applicants for your agency to talk with you. Our goal is to help you get more completed interviews. That's what Augusta does. At the same time, though, as we're doing this, caregivers think our software is a job application, which becomes personalized to them as they complete it. And that's how we're helping them understand why they should talk with you. But what it means is that we actually get about your caregiver applicants to answer about 20 questions that are all home care specific about their experience, schedule, languages, a whole bunch of home care specific stuff. They answer 20 different questions, and we get 95% of your applicants to complete all those questions. So the reason that's important is because now we've got about almost 200,000 applicants for caregiver jobs specifically who have answered this set of 20 questions. And for a lot of our customers, we can see exactly how fast they're interviewing, how fast they're hiring, who they're hiring, who's qualified and disqualified. So we've got this massive data set that is where I'm getting a lot of my information from. And we know it's statistically significant because it's we're talking 200,000 applicants that are specifically applying for caregiver jobs. So it's a really, really important data set. And that's just so that way you understand where we're getting our information and that it is valid, basically. So with that, as I said, I'm going to start with just a little bit about the hiring funnel. I think a lot of people already know this, but I just wanted to get on the same page about definitions here. So your hiring funnel is a systematic approach to recruiting and tracking your candidates through different stages of the hiring process. The reason why it's important may be kind of obvious to you, but it's measurable. So it means that you can actually identify the areas that you need to improve. And then it's data-driven. So that means over a week, over a month, you start to see volumes and ratios that can actually give you realistic, effective actions to take to improve your process. So as you can see in the picture here, starts super wide with your total applicant volume and then narrows down as you get closer to hiring somebody because you weed people out and all these things happen. So I'm going to use a example from my own personal life to explain why the measurement and data-driven aspects of a hiring funnel are so important. So in my work, I actually spend quite a bit of time cold calling home care agency owners, trying to get them on the phone. And I'm mentioning this because it's really pretty similar, a hiring funnel, pretty similar to a sales funnel. Um, so there are some days where if you ask me at the end of the day, I would say, I had a terrible day. I feel like I didn't talk to any home care agency owners, and the conversations that I did have went terribly. There are some days where I feel like that, right? And I'm sure every recruiter who's on this conversation right now has had that feeling as well, and it stinks. Um, so I think we've all been there. But the reality is when you look at it week over week, month over month, total volume of everybody you called, everybody you actually had a good, real conversation with who is a right fit. That's where you can see your overall numbers and be confident that as long as you keep doing those things, the outcomes you want will start to happen. Like I know for me, it's very consistent. I connect and have a real conversation with 10% of all the home care agency owners that I cold call. Even when I have those days where my perception is that it was the worst day. I had bad conversations, I barely talked to anybody. It doesn't matter. When I look at it over the course of the month, 10%. It's very consistent. And knowing that then gives me the opportunity to say, okay, what can I do in my messaging to make a difference and change that from 10% of people that I have a really good conversation with to 15%? Is there some way I can approach those conversations more effectively? So that's why the hiring funnel is so important. It's just like a sales funnel. It tells you exactly the levers that you can pull, and then you start to get ideas of when you pull them, what do you want to have happen, basically. So super important. And by the way, if you just joined us, go ahead. You can feel free to use the chat, or excuse me, the Q&A tool in the webinar there, and I will try and keep an eye on it in case you have any questions that come up. All right. So hopefully this is like fun, kind of a funny meme. I don't know. I thought it was funny. Jerry Seinfeld is over here saying that going to the gym is the easiest thing in the world that there is, or not going to the gym is the easiest thing in the world that there is to do. I think this is a perfect analogy to thinking about your healthy hiring funnel and what that means. So I imagine it as just as if you'd get a gym membership to get fit. If you're not considering the activities that you do at the gym and how frequently you do them, then you have no way of knowing whether or not you're making any progress at all. So in the hiring funnel, you need to think about which metrics do you measure and how frequently are you measuring them? And that'll help you see real improvements. So the reason I say this is because in home care, going a little bit further with this analogy, in home care, it's really common that we don't know where the next client is going to come from. We don't know what location they're going to be in, what their schedule needs are going to be, the experience level of the caregiver that needs to be able to help them. And so that kind of creates this impulse to shift hiring efforts in one direction or the other as that new client comes in, being like kind of scrambling, right? But if we use this analogy, that's basically the equivalent of going to the gym one time, doing one push-up, and then going home and expecting that you're going to be able to run a marathon the next day, right? It's very obvious, right? It's not going to help you meet your long-term hiring goals. So generally speaking, you need to do the right exercises. You need to do them frequently enough. If you want to run a marathon, you have to practice running multiple times a week, right? So that begs the question then, what are the metrics you need to measure to make sure that you're getting that healthy hiring funnel? So that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so there's a million things you could measure, like nonstop, right? But what we've narrowed down here is some of the top things to measure. And it's primarily because they are some of the biggest, baddest levers in your process that you can pull on. So there's three buckets: your volume, your rates, and your time, essentially. So there's three things I put in bold here: total disqualified applicants, inquiry to connection, and time to connection. So you'll notice right here, one very important thing is that I'm talking about measuring these things out of all applicants, not from scheduled interview to show up interviewed. It's out of all applicants. And I'm going to explain in just a minute why that is. But these three areas I'm going to talk about today, disqualified applicants, time to connection, and inquiry to connection, they are the three biggest levers in your process. They're perhaps the most important things. And I'm going to explain why. Okay, so as I mentioned at the very beginning, we've had about 200,000 applicants complete almost the identical set of 20 questions about their home care experience, everything that would qualify an applicant at a very base level for your home care agency. And it varies a little bit, and don't shoot the messenger here, but it's about 68% of all applicants that are going to be disqualified for home care. And it's not that you're necessarily doing something wrong or the applicant's doing something wrong. It's kind of the nature of the recruiting environment today. Applicants get spammed with job offers, and so they keep applying over and over and over again and aren't applying thoughtfully. And they're kind of being enabled to do that by the typical job boards out there. So I'm not going to say it's anybody's fault. It is just a fact that 68%-ish, varies by agency a little bit, but on the whole, out of all of our customers, 200,000 applicants, 68% are disqualified. So what that means is that you need to think of your volume as a finite number, and then think about who is disqualified and why, because that is one important lever that you can pull in the process, along with volume of applicants. Just knowing that there's this massive portion that is not going to be a good fit at all, and thinking about why they're not a good fit and how many there are. Okay, so that's 68% and why it's so important. The next important metric, and this is about Augusta, but it's relevant to any home care agency out there. So we know out of our customers, they are 2,200% more likely to hire qualified applicants that have gone through our set of 20 questions and we've deemed them qualified, compared to the ones that we disqualified. So what this gets to is specifically your rate of connection with your applicants. And I'm going to dive deep into that. But essentially, it is the most important way to think about how you measure your team's capacity, essentially. So I know I'm probably jumping a couple steps ahead in your head right now. But if you think about it, we know that people who are qualified at a base level are 2,200% more likely to be hired than compared to the ones who are not. It means that all those 68% of disqualified people are wasting your recruiter's time and their capacity to work with the good applicants. So again, this is kind of a don't shoot the messenger theme here. Unfortunately, the vast majority of recruiters today are spending a giant portion of their time calling not qualified applicants, and it stops them from spending more time with qualified applicants. That's what this number is telling you. And so it directly relates to the capacity of your team, which is what a connection with an applicant represents. Okay, so then last important data point here on why those three categories of metrics matter the most. We know from our customers that our customers are 200% more likely to hire applicants that have been qualified by Augusta they self-scheduled an interview, and the recruiter called them right away and had their actual interview within less than 4 days. So that obviously speaks directly to speed to hire, time to connection, time to interview. We know for sure if the applicant gets the opportunity to self-book an interview, you call them right away and you interview them in less than 4 days, your 200%, your probability increases 200% to hire that person. So that's how we know for sure that time to connection and time to interview are two of your absolute most important metrics, because that is significant, right? Like these are significant numbers. Okay, so the next topic here is why measure your entire hiring funnel out of all applicants. Actually, you know what? I should pause for just a second to see if there's any questions that came up. Feel free to use that Q&A tool. I have to switch back and forth here to pull it up, so I apologize about that. Okay. Yep, feel free to ask any questions if you have them in that Q&A, but I will just keep going. Okay, so why measure out of all applicants? Simply put, if you don't have any applicants, you won't have any hires, right? It's very obvious. So the number of applicants in your funnel is the start of your hiring funnel. It's also your biggest lever. Volume is the gas on the fire, right? So if you think about it, I put an example here on the screen, a kind of a simple low numbers way to think about it. So I talk to a lot of home care agencies that tell me that their show up rate is 50%. And the way they're conceiving of that is that it's out of scheduled interviews. So that would be the equivalent of saying one scheduled applicant always results in half a completed interview, right? Or in this better, easier to understand example here, one scheduled interview, if your show up rate is 100%, that means every time you have one scheduled interview, you're going to get one completed interview. So that's why you can't measure your rates out of the previous step in the process. On the other hand, you can see on the right-hand column here, measuring your show up rate out of all applicants gives you the true number, right? So it's actually 10% of people, total volume of applicants that are going to show up to an interview in this scenario, not 100%, right? Okay, just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page about that, because that specifically gets to the health of your hiring funnel, right? If you're just measuring stage to stage, that's not really going to show you what you need to know, which is how much volume do I need to add to how much gas do I need to put on the fire to get the outcome I'm looking for, right? At the very, very bottom of the funnel. So feel free to chat in questions if I can clarify that or make more sense. Okay, so the next biggest lever, so you've got volume, right? That's gas on the fire. Next biggest lever in your hiring funnel is understanding who is qualified and who is disqualified. And I think a lot of people think about who's qualified and think about some of the patterns of who's qualified, and that's a very helpful thing to do. But I'm here to say we actually believe that looking at your disqualified applicants is just as, if not more important than thinking about who's qualified. Because the disqualified applicants is actually going to start to lead you to another lever you can pull and lead you in the direction of how to find more qualified applicants. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. Okay, so the largest proportion of your applicants are disqualified, right? I said at the beginning, it's about 68%. Could be a little more, a little less for your agency, but on the whole, about 68% are disqualified. So after volume, it is your second biggest lever proportion of applicants to consider what you want to do with. And if you know why an applicant is disqualified, then you can decide whether or not there is something you want to or can do about it to grow your business. So it literally helps you focus on the things that you can control and how you manage your time. Because if you know there are some aspects of an applicant that are just sheerly, they are never going to be a good fit. Like they don't have a car, for instance, and in your service area, it's a must-have. Not wasting any time on that person is the best thing you can do, basically. So if you're familiar with sales and anybody's got any experience in that, you know, as a salesperson, it's always better to get a yes or a no than a maybe, right? Because it literally saves you time. It means you can move on to the next one. So same idea here. If you know you've got those disqualifying factors that are just sheerly never going to work out for whatever reason, they're not authorized to work in the US, whatever it is, then that is something where you can just manage your time. So I've got two more examples here, because they're really, really common ones that come up in most for most home care agencies. So unfortunately, it is not in our control where caregivers live. We can't make people move. It takes a really long time to make new humans, and it'd be hard to make them in the places you want them to be. So you can't control where they live. What you can control is if you spend time with them. And knowing where they live or don't live allows you to start to think about, are there different sources of applicants that I can use to find more people that are actually already live in the locations that I want them to, right? So that's what you have control over, but you can't control where people live. So knowing that they were disqualified because of their location then gives you a whole set of other things that you can try to think about. Different advertising sources, different ways of advertising, going to career fairs, other things that bring in local people. Another thing that's very difficult to control is what caregivers, what applicants perceive as the job as they apply to it. So Augusta tries to help with that, of course, but a lot of people, I hear this all the time, a lot of caregivers who are new to the industry, a lot of applicants rather, not quite caregivers yet, but a lot of people applying to home care jobs think that the work is companion care. They have this notion that they want to go play cards with grandma, which is wonderful. I would love to play cards with grandma. But the reality is that most of the work is personal care, right? It's the ADLs. We all know that. But what you can control is whether or not you manage your time on those applicants and what you do with them, right? Because that's a portion where you have more options, if you think about it, than the location of applicants. If you decide, if you know, okay, 8% of all my applicants are being disqualified because they specifically want to do companion care, then you can think about, how am I messaging to those applicants? Do I want to try and capture them and bring them into the fold? What am I saying to them in that phone screen to get them excited about a new career? And how do I train them? And how do I market that training program? Like, then it kind of begs all those questions, but you can only do that if you've measured the fact that okay, this is a significant portion of my disqualified applicants. Now it's an actionable thing that I can decide if I want to go add something to my business to capture those people. So that's why it's incredibly important to focus on and understand who your disqualified applicants are. It's such a big portion of the people that are going to apply to your jobs. Okay, so I put a quick example in numbers here on how changing your hiring process based on disqualified reasons in volume makes a big difference. So on the left-hand side, I've got the original hiring funnel. This is just sheer example, round numbers. You get 100 applicants, about 68 are going to be disqualified, about 32 are going to be qualified and worth the recruiter's time. If you make some changes in your messaging and decide, you know what, I'm going to go try and bring in companion caregivers and train them up, right? I'm going to try and make a big effort, a big push to capture those people into my pipeline and get them into the hiring process. If you make that one tweak, you still get 100 applicants, but let's say you get 8 more qualified ones because you were able to help them understand the job better, message them better, train them, or get them into your training program somehow. And then the third lever I was talking about is your volume, right? So let's say you made that change, you're capturing more companion caregivers who you're going to train up. And then you add gas to the fire, you put up 50 more applicants into your pipeline through ad spend, through other job boards, through job fairs, training programs for the public, whatever those sources are of increasing your applicants, then it's going to increase your disqualified and qualified, right? Hopefully that's a very simple way to put it. But if you have any questions, just chat them in or put them in the Q&A. I'm going to pop that open real quick again so I can see if anybody's got anything. All right. Okay. So now the exciting stuff here that I put in the title of this webinar. What is your connect rate and why is it so important to measure it? So your connect rate is the number of dials that your recruiter is making to have a real conversation with a right fit applicant. Usually in our industry, that means the phone interview or phone screen. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but the reason why this is incredibly important is because it measures your most limited resource, which is the team's capacity. I consider it one of the most strategic imperatives of your business, just the same way it is in a sales funnel, because it is the measure of quality to quantity. So it's your qualified and disqualified applicants to the measure of volume. It's literally the balance of those two. So I've got a quick example here. The resume that you're looking at on the right for Mohammed. This is taken from a job board, pretty common job board that people use. And if you can imagine for a minute, your recruiter getting 20 of these people, where literally all they've told you is that they went to high school. On this, it says they went to high school twice, which maybe they did. And they worked as a security officer sometime, we don't know when. So even if let's say if your recruiter is looking at 3 of these, it's probably still going to take them, it does take capacity, literally energy and time to look at this person and make a snap decision. Am I going to pursue them at all? Am I going to call them? Do I have enough information? At face value, does this look like somebody I can hire? But the reality is even when you make that snap decision, you don't know, right? Like Mohammed could be great, but he applied, on the job board he was using, he one-click applied on the job and it sent his job profile to 10 agencies. So like literally the recruiter in this situation is expending energy on thinking about this applicant at the same time as them not even having enough information to evaluate. It's like a double loss here that's happening just from looking at this one application. And if you can imagine doing it 10 times a day or 20 times a day and looking at resumes where you can't tell or you're guessing, right? Like that's a huge expense of energy and capacity. And at the same time, limits the volume of what your recruiter is able to handle, right? So it is like, that's why the connect rate of real conversations that your recruiter has with the right fit applicants, that is the measure of quality to quantity. Because I don't know about you, if you think about it this way, I'd rather have a 10% connection rate that results in 100 right fit applicants than a 40% connect rate that results in 10 qualified applicants, right? So that's why it's so important to consider what the capacity is, who's qualified and who's not, what's the volume of it, and understand that number in the middle. pause for just a second here. I think I saw a question come in. Okay, somebody's got to leave a little bit early. No problem at all. See you later, Kelly. Okay, so now I want to talk about, okay, so I talked about it's really, really important to measure your connect rate. And talked about what are some of the things you can change in that process, your volume, the quality of the applicants that your recruiter is talking to. So what are the things that actually affect this whole process? I kind of alluded to some of them in this example, but I'm going to recap right here. So the first thing is bad contact information. If you think about it, that's like the number one thing. If you can't get in touch with them, what is the point? Maybe you even spent 5 minutes evaluating somebody just to try and call them, and it's not out of service number because they applied with their old resume on a job board that they, signed up for 3 years ago. So bad contact information, incomplete information that's specific to home care. Mohammed on the previous page is the perfect example. You don't know anything. So you're left not having enough information to make any sort of decision at all, but you're still wasting time on it. Talking to too many people that are the wrong fit applicants. So that's where I'm saying that example I was giving of, let's say your connect rate is 40%, but it only results in 10 completed phone interviews with caregivers that are like qualified. It doesn't, I mean, that's a whole lot of dials that your recruiter is making, a whole lot of people volume that they're reaching out to for very little output, right? So talking with too many wrong fit applicants can be just as expensive in your time as it is to be talking with too few people. Inconsistent outreach to applicants is also a big one, or impersonal and low quality messaging to them. So if you think about an example here where you've got 1 week, your recruiter's capacity is high. They have a lot of extra time on their hands. So they're calling every applicant who's qualified same day, like within hours of their application or within an hour of your application. So they've got capacity. They're able to make those calls immediately to the best applicants, right? Without wasting time on the incorrect applicants. Versus maybe, let's say the next week, your recruiter is slammed. They've got 3 training classes. They've got 10 interviews lined up. Like they've got already so much on their plate that it's hard to make those calls, the qualified applicants right away when they come in and welcome them and say you're excited about their interview and all this stuff. So the person that you called same day, somebody you were much more likely to hire than the person that you waited 7 days to hire. So that's why the cadence of how you contact applicants is exceptionally important and directly affects whether or not you're going to connect with that person and ultimately hire them. Delays in calling, scheduling interviews, kind of same. And too many steps before a phone screen or a phone interview, and having a kind of poor experience before they even get to that point. So that's actually, I have an example of that last one right there, or actually kind of a combination of these things. So this is a real life example from one of our customers. We did a case study with them where their original hiring funnel on the left-hand side, it started with 2 different applications. So the caregiver 1-click applied on the job board. And then because the recruiter never had enough information from this applicant, they were being sent a second set of questions to answer. They had to complete their contact information again. They had to fill out all these other questions. Since there's this 2-step application thing, partially it was because there's not enough good contact information, enough information in general, right? So they had bad contact info originally and this drop off between 2 different applications. And next, because of this process, 2 different steps, multiple questions, the recruiters were taking up to 2 days to call the applicants that were good and made it through the qualification process. What we changed with this agency is we added Augusta. we basically in one fell swoop, so we basically took away one of their applications because we got all the right information the first time, made it super, super simple, because otherwise the applicants get confused by doing two different applications or annoyed. So make it super, super simple to get all the information we need the first time around. And that enabled the recruiter to call same day, basically, by us doing this more automated things in their process. And what that ends up resulting in is out, and again, these numbers are out of all applicants, because as I said at the beginning, that's the only way to measure your hiring funnel. Everything else is incomplete information. So their applicant to scheduled interview ratio went dramatically up. That was the biggest part of the process that we were able to change, because right contact information, complete information about their background and that's relevant to home care, called same day. So that's the number one metric that those all the things related to your connection rate is going to impact. And then just as a result of that, even if your no-shows, the overall rate doesn't change, it's still going to mean you get more completed interviews just because you connected with more real applicants. And as you can see in this case study, ultimately that in this case meant about double the number of hires. So feel free to chat in any questions that you may have as I keep going along here. Okay. So what do you need to do to improve your connect rate? This is fortunately an area of your hiring process where you actually do have quite a bit of control. There's some stuff really hard to control, where applicants live, right? Can't control that. But these are all things that are going to make it so that way you do get more real right fit applicants on the phone and completing your interviews. First things first, if the applicant is at all confused by your application process, they're being asked to fill out two different applications, you have to streamline that. The simpler the process is for an applicant to actually get on the phone with a real person, the better. Making sure that your applicants understand the job as much as you can prior to that conversation with the recruiter, super, super important. It means they're qualifying themselves in or out of the job. Typically speaking, it's very hard for caregivers to do that today because of what I talked about with job boards spamming the applicants. So they don't apply thoughtfully, they're not reading the job description, and thus they don't really understand what they applied for. So making sure that the applicants really understand the job and have expectations aligned well to what you want is very, very important in terms of whether or not you're actually going to connect with right fit applicants. I already mentioned it, updated contact information, very important. If you don't have that, you can't really do anything at all. Calling the good applicants immediately as soon as they come in. Obviously, that means you need to know who the good ones are, but calling the good ones immediately, making sure that your applicants don't schedule their interview more than 4 days out. That is a massive drop-off point if they do schedule more than 4 days out. It's not just a little bit, it's 200%, right? Like that's what the data that I had shown at the beginning. Making sure the recruiter's time is solely focused on calling right fit applicants. We know without a doubt, people that are disqualified on basic criteria are so unlikely to be hired. It is just a waste of your time. And I totally get it. It is, the impulse to call everybody just in case you missed an opportunity is so strong. I feel it all the time where I'm like looking back through people that I talked to a year ago and I'm like, should I call that person back? I have actually hotter leads to work. I do, like people that are attending this webinar right now. You know what I mean? Like there are better leads than others. And we know for sure that ones that are disqualified by Augusta, there's certainly other ways you could disqualify applicants, but the ones disqualified by Augusta are so unlikely to be hired. It's just not worth your time. And then finally, here's the connection rate, right? So it's spending more energy rather than trying to contact disqualified people, a better way, a better use of your time is to see who is the right applicant, who is not the right applicant, and what do I need to do to get more volume of the people that I've determined are right, basically. So thinking about different sources, more potentially more ad spend. I hate to be the bearer of bad news on that, but it could be more ad spend, different sources, and then flexing who is qualified and who's disqualified. Because there are some things you can bend on and there are some things you can't, and that's what it is. But like, you can make that decision for your business. So those are the main things that you can do to improve your connection rate, those real conversations that you're having with applicants. And that's all I got today, folks. If you want to stick around for another 10 minutes and learn about Augusta, I would love that. And we do have a special deal. So if you're on this webinar and you decide you want to start Augusta in July, you are going to get 50% off your first month. So now is a great time. And there's my contact information. Just in case you can't stick around, feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, or we have a book a demo form on the website where you can just schedule an appointment with me. So, and of course, if you have any other questions, thoughts, or comments, feel free to still throw them in the chat there. I'm just going to pull up. And yes, of course, you can get a copy of the slides, and I will have that recording up in just a couple days on the website. Okay, so I talked a lot about this in the webinar already, but this is a real life example of what is happening to your applicants today on common job boards. Your applicants are getting spammed with job offers the same way that they spam you with their application. There's a whole lot of other things going on, but this is one problem that Augusta can actually solve. That's what we're doing. So we're making sure that the applicants understand at a much better level than they normally would about why your job could be a good fit. Because what we realized through the example that you're seeing on the screen here is that nobody's reading the job description. They're just one click applying on 10 jobs at one time. So we basically needed another way to help the applicant understand that they actually could be a good fit. And same thing happens via text today. There's a whole bunch of different texting services where they just drip on applicants, sending people similar messages for like a year at a time. And that might have been a good thing a while ago, but these days those messages get marked as spam by phones. So it literally adds to the noise and confusion of applicants. And some of this stuff just does not look trustworthy. If I saw some of these links come to me in a text from a job that I didn't remember applying for, I'm not going to reply to that. I'm not going to click on that link. If anything, I'll write back stop and say, don't message me. So we knew basically at Augusta, we realized we're not going to keep mass emailing people. We're not going to mass text them, at least just to random people, right? Because they really don't remember who you are. So we needed a different way to make sure that they actually understand our job. So what Augusta does is we actually, make sure I'm still sharing my correct screen. Okay. So caregivers think that Augusta is a job application. That's their experience. So they look at your posting on Indeed or your careers page on your website and check out that apply button. And those apply buttons go directly into your instance of Augusta. So they think it's a job application, but as they fill it out, it's going to become personalized to them with the information that they need to know. And like I said, they didn't read the job description, so they probably didn't realize until this very moment that they are close to your office, which is what this example is showing. So the caregiver, they are getting an idea of why your agency could be a good fit for them. Their location has a massive impact on whether or not they'll show up for a first interview. If the caregiver thinks about their drive to the interview in terms of gas, not in terms of time, right? So if they have to drive 30 miles and they haven't already made a really personal connection with somebody, I'm sorry, they're not showing up. It's maybe 1% of people that would do that, because caregivers need a job now. It's a financially sensitive group of people. You can't ask them to just come into the office unless they're excited about the job and they think that they might actually get it. So that's why it's so important. This is a really motivating factor for applicants to know when they are close to the office, because it's literally going to make it easier mentally for them to come in, because it's like, oh, I don't have to spend that much money or time on anything to be able to show up. And if you combine that with a call right away to this person to tell them how excited you are to have that interview with them, it's going to make them even more motivated. Okay, so that's on the caregiver's perspective, right? We're personalizing the experience of them applying to the job. As I already talked about, within 60 seconds, we get them to complete about 20 different questions. They're all home care specific information. And using that, we grade them, green, yellow, red, and then in a dashboard, organize them for your recruiting team as basically, here's all your applicants, here's the qualified applicants, here's the ones that we scheduled automatically for you because they were good, here's the ones you interviewed and the ones you hired. So I hope everything in this webinar made sense enough so that way you can kind of understand the way we organize this for you. We know without a doubt that spending all your time just on the people who are qualified and scheduled an interview is the best use of your team's capacity. And as I said, it's the ratio of quality to quantity, right? So we know for sure the people that we have disqualified are you're 2,200% more likely to hire the people that we've qualified. So it's not just a little bit, it is a lot. Calling these not qualified applicants is a waste of everybody's time. That is on the management side. So we're grading them, we're self-scheduling the applicants and making it super, super simple to focus on the right people and expend your energy in the right place, increasing your connect rate. And that's going to make the biggest impact overall in the organization, is optimizing that quality to quantity ratio. You can also see here in the dashboard the channels or sources that the applicants came from. And that's literally going to tell you, okay, my best applicants are coming from this job board. My best applicants are coming from this career fair, right? Because you can track all of that in one spot. So that way you know, here's the volume, here's the place to double down on for volume. Versus here's a different way to understand who's qualified and disqualified. Because our dashboard will actually tell you the disqualification reasons as well. I'm going to just show you a different example of that really quick, so that way you can see what I mean. Okay, so here's an example of how you can understand who's qualified and disqualified. In this dashboard here, you'll see an alert up at the top, and if you were to use Augusta, you would see something similar, but specific to your agency. So this agency, they're disqualifying a lot of people because of where they live, which is sometimes you can't do anything about that, right? There's nothing to be done there. But they're disqualifying also a lot of people because of that same example that I gave, that a lot of their applicants want companion care, but right now they don't have the capacity or don't want to or can't hire people who want companion care because they know it's just too much training and too much work to get those people up to speed for whatever reason. Like, who knows what the reasons are, but that's why most people are the second biggest reason people are being disqualified at this agency. So then by knowing that, you can decide, is that something I want to do about? Right? But if you don't know, if you're not measuring that, you have no idea if that's a lever you can even pull. But in this case, that could potentially get this agency almost 40 more qualified applicants if they were willing to figure out how to message to them, train them, and get them up to speed. Okay, so that's a lot about Augusta. If you would like to get a little bit more information about what we do, talk about potentially implementing Augusta at your agency, just reach out to me. I'd love to talk with you and learn more about your business and see if we could be a good fit to help. Put my contact information back up on the screen here. And let me see if there's any last questions in here. A couple questions came up. Okay, so one question here is, do you post in job boards, or do you go to job boards and pull out the applicants from the job boards? Yeah, great question, Sandra. So our customers use our software on the job boards that they're already using. So on the example that I was showing on Indeed, this would be your own job posting that you've already got out there. And there is a way where you can basically change the apply method. So that way, when applicants see the apply button, they click on it and actually go into your instance of Augusta. So it's your job ad. We connect through the apply. We basically become the apply method on wherever you're advertising. Okay, so a good, interesting question from Patricia. She's saying candidates who are outside of our territory are being disqualified, but they can still apply. Do you have suggestions to avoid this? So I actually, my perspective is that it's not necessarily something to avoid. It's more so a data point for you. And what I mean by that is, so if you know that there are a ton of people being disqualified because they're not in your service area, you can't change where people live, but you could potentially tweak your ads or where you're advertising. So I guess it's, I can see how it would be like kind of easy to get sucked in by, I don't want to even see all these disqualified people who don't live in the right areas. But I would say there is actually an opportunity there. So if you know how many people are being disqualified, then you can think about, is there something I can do about it? Can I change the wording of the title of my job description to say this town? And sometimes in certain job boards, there are actually certain location settings that make a difference in terms of who your ads are being shown to. So that could be something to look into. And then there's different sources, right? So like going to a job fair in the town that you want to hire people is probably more likely to get people who live in that area, right? Like, so there are some things you can do knowing that information, but not being able to change where they live, right? So I would still say, even though you don't want to talk to those people, there is useful information to gain from knowing who's disqualified and why they're disqualified. So I'm just reading a couple more responses here. So a couple more questions from Patricia, and I am noticing that somebody else has their hand raised. So Patricia was also mentioning that some of their candidates want companion care and wondering about removing that as one of their options. And some of them have been able to book an interview, but we're out of the territory. So I think it might be helpful for us to chat after this, Patricia, because it sounds like these are some specific things. What I would say about people who want companion care is that it's still worthwhile to be asking them the question. And then in Augusta, you're able to decide whether or not that's somebody who you have deemed qualified, basically. So in your Augusta account, you can basically say, where is it, the role that they're interested in. So if they want companion care, maybe that's somebody who's disqualified, or maybe this is our category for maybe it's a yellow candidate. So that may be somebody I'm willing to consider, but I want to look at the rest of what they're offering, right? Like, so do they live in the right location and have a great schedule for us? They can work on the weekends. But they're only interested in companion care. That may be somebody who's worth having that conversation to see if you can set their expectations about the job and convince them at the same time. It's kind of a balance in that conversation, right? So I wouldn't say don't ask the question. I would say it's more a matter of what do you do with that information, basically. Um, and I do think that there's going to be circumstances where not every single thing is truthful and people fill this out extremely thoughtfully. I can't say it's a magic bullet and it's going to solve every single recruiting challenge that we have of the wrong people getting to your desk. But what we know, and just going back to my on the whole, when this is where we're stepping back out of the daily basis, right? We need to think about this from a 30,000-foot perspective across our 200,000 applicants who have gone through Augusta. We know that you are 2,200% more likely to hire the ones that we've qualified than the ones that we've disqualified. So even if in that one day you're like, ah, man, I talked to these 3 people who don't live in the right area. If you step back, look at it over the course of weeks and look at it over the course of months, you're going to be so much more likely to hire the qualified applicants than the ones that are disqualified. So that's what I would say. There are going to be stragglers that get through one way or the other. And some days it's going to feel like this thing is happening. But if you keep stepping back, looking at it on a monthly basis, looking at total out of total applicants, like those healthy hiring funnel things, that's where you're going to start to see a big difference. Leo, did you still have a question? I'm going to go ahead and unmute you in case you do. Maybe the question got answered. Okay, well, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say let's wrap it up for today. Patricia, I will totally follow up with you after this. Hopefully my information here makes sense and it's helpful and everything like that, but I'll definitely give you a ring after this. And to anybody else who's left here, definitely give me a call. I would love to talk with you and learn about your recruiting process and see if there's anything we can do to help. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great day.